Before we start today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. The content in this podcast is for general reference and educational purposes only. It is not meant to be complete or exhaustive or to be applicable to any specific individual's medical condition. No information provided in this podcast constitutes medical advice and is not an attempt to practice medicine or to provide specific medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This podcast does not create a physician-patient relationship and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please do not rely on this podcast for emergency medical treatment. Remember that everyone is different, so make sure you consult your own healthcare professional before seeking any new treatment and before you alter, suspend, or initiate a new change in your routine. Welcome to The Starting Gate. We're your hosts, Dr. Kitty Dotson
and Dr. Sarah Sheets,
two internal medicine doctors who spent years practicing traditional primary care. Over time, we realized something was missing from modern healthcare. A real understanding of how everyday lifestyle choices impact overall health.
We'll help you cut through the noise of the countless health influencers and their conflicting opinions, because no matter who you follow, the basics of lifestyle medicine are at the heart of it all.
Welcome back to The Starting Gate. We're your hosts, Dr. Kitty Dotson
and Dr. Sarah Sheets.
So today we're going to be talking about midlife, and I know we've spent quite a few episodes talking about the hormonal changes that happen during perimenopause and menopause. And we've talked a lot about the chronic disease risks that come up during this time, like cardiovascular disease and insulin resistance. But today we really want to talk a little bit more about it and actually help you with some strategies that can help. And we also want to not ignore men this time. So we want to talk about what women and men are facing in their 40s and 50s, why things they may have done earlier in life aren't working for them, and some tips on things that they can try to reach those health goals they're looking for.
Today, we're joined by longevity specialist, Dr. Meredith Sweeney. She's been on this show before and brought us so much amazing information. We're going to, again, tackle some of those lifestyle medicine topics of nutrition and exercise, but also talk about hormones, metabolic health, and how we can be making those changes in order to reach our overall longevity goals. So thank you, Dr. Sweeney, for joining us. If you could just give our guests a little reminder about who you are and where you work.
Hey, thank you so much for having me back on. This was so much fun the first time we recorded it, and you guys eased me into the world of podcasting, so thank you for that. About me, I am a bariatric surgeon who left her practice 2 years ago to instead focus on proactive wellness. So as a bariatric surgeon, which I did for 12 years, I was focusing on treating the very end of metabolic dysfunction. So severely obese patients and doing surgeries on them to reverse that. But what happened in the last 5 or 6 years of my career is I took a deep dive down metabolic health optimization outside of the operating room, learned more and more about that, and decided that was my passion and that's what I wanted to pursue. So I opened my practice, which is called Sano Longevity. It's in Louisville, Kentucky. I opened that in March 2025. And what I do there is health optimization from the ground up, using a cellular health approach to help people feel their best now, to maybe identify those missing pieces of the puzzle so that they can really feel great and set themselves up for the best long-term health possible. So what I tell people is, I want you to feel your best now, but I also want you to be the most amazing 80 and 90-year-old version of yourself that's possible.
Love that. And I think midlife is such a unique time. I'm in my 40s now, and it's kind of like you've had enough life experience to try some things for your health, to see what's benefited you, what hasn't. And also, you're at a stage, if you've had kids, where maybe you're getting a little bit more time for yourself and you actually have time to think about, am I doing what's best for my health? So for people at this age, why is it so important to reevaluate those habits, especially nutrition?
Chronic diseases of aging, the things that we think of are almost inevitable because we see them in our older generations, like heart disease, blood pressure, strokes, dementia, immobility, cancer. Those processes start in midlife. They just develop their symptoms and they show their ugly face in our later years. So we really need to be paying attention to what we're doing with our lives now in our 40s. I'm right there with you. I'm 45. This is the prime time to really be taking advantage of our health world, we still have it. We're still able to exercise. We are independent for the most part. For most of us, our kids are a little bit older. They're certainly usually out of diapers, and we're no longer waiting on them hand and foot 24/7, even though sometimes maybe it still feels like that. But we have a little bit more time to ourselves. And quite honestly, we're getting closer to our deaths than we were to our birth. And so now is the time where this realization hits like, okay, I need to take some serious agency in this and prevent the decline that I've seen in maybe the people that I love around me, because we can, but it starts now.
When it comes to nutrition, what do you really think are the main focuses that someone in midlife should be thinking about?
Okay, so this is going to be a long answer because first I want to define midlife. What are we saying here? For me, that is 40s, early 50s, maybe even late 30s. We are experiencing changes in our bodies, and what worked in our 20s to obtain that awesome body composition, that time when we felt really good in our own skin, it stops working. So that's what I want to dive into in this time that we have together. Why does it stop working, and how can we counteract it, and how can we keep that body that we want? Because I love to talk about disease prevention, and I love to talk about reducing your chance of cognitive decline and things, but we all really want to feel great in our own body. And so that when we're talking about midlife health, that's what people really want. And good thing it coincides with the decrease in chance of chronic diseases. So if we want to feel great in our own skin, optimize our body composition, then we have to take a different approach in midlife. And that is because of physiologic changes that happen during this time period that we have to address, but the science is pretty clear on how to address them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Nutrition is at the forefront of that. So getting back to your question about nutrition, we could get away with a lot. Certainly when we were teenagers, definitely when we were in our 20s, and a lot of times even into our early 30s, but our muscle mass naturally starts to decline in our 30s, and that accelerates in our 40s and 50s if we don't do anything about it. And the reason I focus on muscle is because that is our metabolic engine. And as soon as we start to let that slip away, everything else kind of goes down with it. Our body composition, our overall health and energy, our hormones, basically just how we feel and reducing our chances of chronic diseases in the future. They all depend on our ability to keep that muscle. So the way we need to keep that changes as we get older because it's naturally starting to decline, and we develop something called anabolic resistance. Anabolic resistance is this phenomenon that happens to everybody where we need to be more intentional with our nutrition, specifically our protein, and more intentional with our resistance training efforts in order to build muscle. Basically, in order to keep our muscle, we have to work a little bit harder in midlife and beyond. But it's not impossible, and we can do it. And here's how I like to talk to my patients about doing it. We are going to need doses of protein. So ideally, I like to shoot around 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight for your daily protein goal and spread that protein out throughout the day. Our protein does something. It is the building block of our muscle. So we can do all the strength training in the world, but if we don't have protein, that fuel that we're putting into our body to be able to build that muscle, we're going to be working against ourselves. So muscle requires that we eat enough protein and that we give that muscle the stimulus in the form of strength training to build it. It takes about 30 grams of protein per meal, per snack, in order to turn on something called muscle protein synthesis. It is more important in midlife that we hit that number, and we hit it multiple times throughout the day. So each meal I recommend for my patients should be about a minimum of 30 grams of protein, and then a lot of times men need to go even higher, and that's to turn on this process called muscle protein synthesis. So we take that ingredient, that protein, and then we move it to the gym or your basement, wherever you want to do your resistance training. There's no wrong answer here. But we have to put our muscles against resistance that they're not used to. This strength training is just making your muscles work harder. It doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be some long, drawn-out program that you do at the gym very eloquently and people around you are watching and admiring you. No, this can be done in your basement just with push-ups. Because what we're looking for is a stimulus to the muscle that is more than they're used to doing on a daily basis. So let me give an example of that. Most of us are used to carrying groceries in from the car into the house. We're carrying these heavy loads. So our body's kind of used to that. In order to build muscle, we need heavier groceries. We need to put those muscles under more resistance than they are used to on the daily basis. And that's what causes them to grow stronger, not necessarily even bigger, but stronger.
Let's say someone's listening and they think, okay, I'm probably not getting enough protein. I don't even know what my ideal body weight is or how to get that in. Can you walk through an average person, how to calculate that, and then some examples of how you might get that 30 grams of protein multiple times a day?
There is a very easy way to calculate your ideal body weight, and you can just type into a Google search bar, ideal body weight, and you put in whether you're male or female and your height. So that gives you a really good rough estimate of where you should be starting. For a woman that's 5'4", that's me, that's 120 grams of protein, or 120 pounds is my ideal body weight. So I want to shoot for 120 grams of protein. There are some nuances to this recommendation. Someone that is very metabolically active, that has a high resting metabolic rate, they would benefit from more protein. Someone that is on the extremely lean side, they might be fine with just a little bit less than the ideal body weight. But for women, I don't want you to go under 100. For men, I don't want you under 150. I like to use those general rules. If I'm not doing a analysis on someone in my office, I think just general high level. Women, you want more than 100. Men, you want more than 150. So in order to spread that out throughout the day, here's what that can look like. A normal serving of the palm, if you hold out your palm, that size portion of meat or fish is going to be roughly 30 to 40 grams of protein. So this is a good way to eyeball it. A generic protein shake that you can buy at Costco or wherever your local store is that you like to buy protein, the average shake is going to have about 30 grams of protein. So these hit the mark. And then there's things like high protein Greek yogurt that typically has more than 20 grams of protein. Sprinkle on some high protein, low carbohydrate granola, and you've hit that 30 gram mark. So it's not as hard as people make it out to be. But any new change can be a little bit daunting in the early part. So I tell my patients, focus on this for the first month and it will become your new normal. And eventually you won't be thinking about it anymore. But for right now, you might feel like your job is to count grams of protein until it does get to that point where it is just second nature and something that you require every day.
Yeah. Thinking and having to count things for the rest of your life feels overwhelming. And so I always like to tell patients it's really, you do it up front because you're trying to visually learn what a specific amount looks like. And then we can wean off of it because anytime that you think about having to do that for the rest of your life, it makes you not want to do it at all.
Yeah, you put a big task like that in front of someone and they'll just throw in the towel right from the beginning. Heck no, I'm not doing that. But I am telling you, and I see it over and over again in my patients, just trudge through it for a couple of weeks. You will get this down and you won't be counting things for the rest of your life. You'll come to a point where at the end of the day, you'll be like, I had this for breakfast, this for lunch, this for dinner. Yep, I hit my goal today because it is just such second nature. Yeah, I've gotten to the point in my life where if I don't have enough protein, I can tell my body doesn't have that energy. I'm not feeling as strong. And so I'll go and grab something. And I promise you, to the listeners, you will get there too. There's nothing magic about me. You will get there too. We do this with every new habit in our life. Like at some point, your parents had to tell you to brush your teeth over and over again. And now you just do it because if you don't feel right, the same thing's going to happen with your nutrition. The same thing's going to happen with your exercise.
We were talking about protein here, but how does the other macronutrients of carbohydrates and fats, how does that change as we age and how we use them in our bodies?
This is complex. Protein, I think, of all the macronutrients is the most straightforward if we're talking about midlife nutrition. I think this is where we start to diverge as far as where men and women can see benefit. This is something that's highly individualized. If someone is insulin resistant, then we need to pay more attention to their carbs. If they have severe mitochondrial dysfunction, we want to make sure that they're getting enough fat. But carbs and fats, I believe, are necessary for a complete approach to midlife nutrition because they are for brain health, they're for gut health, they are for hormone health. If you severely restrict carbs in a woman in midlife, it can really backfire, and it can backfire quickly. Men have a little bit more leniency when it comes to limiting carbs, but again, this is highly individualized. So, high level, we still want to be paying attention to these things, but also if you just focus on your protein, if you just hit that goal that we talked about not too long ago, you are going to be already setting yourself up for better success.
Yeah. And I think fiber is just another way to be thinking about your carbs. I like to try to think of, am I getting fiber with any carb that I'm eating? Is that something that you think about also in your approach?
I do because, okay, let's first hit the elephant in the room. When Americans talk about carbs, we aren't really talking about whole foods, fruits and vegetables and whole grains. When people refer to carbs, they're talking about processed carbs, brownies, cookies, cakes, packaged goods, crackers, chips. Well, for the purpose of this discussion, for lifestyle medicine, for longevity medicine, when we're talking about carbs, we are talking about the ones that have one ingredient and that were put on this earth. Things like whole foods, whole grains, and colorful fruits and vegetables. So those things naturally come with fiber in them. Fiber is important. It is important for heart health. It's important for managing lipids, things like ApoB. It's massively important in managing your cardiovascular risk and for gut health and anti-inflammatory processes. Like, yes, fiber is a part of it.
I know that's something that I always like to bring up when trying to help people work on their nutrition is let's just simplify it. And if you're thinking about where am I getting my protein and where am I getting my fiber, and you can answer those two questions, you have made already a huge change in how you're eating and can make a big difference in your health just by spending time and energy on those two buckets.
Oh, that's so great. I'm going to start talking to people more about fiber because you just said that.
Yeah, I think we keep learning more and more about the benefits of fiber on both weight management, which I think is counterintuitive when you've been someone, especially our age, where you've grown up fearful of carbs in the keto era and the dieting era, but understanding that not all carbs are equal and how important fiber is on your gut microbiome and then how that affects everything else down the road. So getting used to fiber, I think, is a hard one, and that's where I will plug seeds, my favorite fiber source. Currently on the basil seed kick, but I like to mix basil and chia seeds to get that plant diversity in.
Oh
Sarah,
my
what's
gosh,
your
I didn't
favorite?
know that basil seeds were a thing, and now I'm going to have to research that.
Kitty
On the
got me
chia
on
seed.
them. They're very similar to chia seeds, but they actually have a little bit more fiber than even chia seeds.
Oh my
Yes, and just learning from recently, they have a lot of natural collagen.
Oh, yeah. I don't remember.
But
they
do
did
they
tell
get
us.
stuck in your teeth like chia seeds? So you have a little black thing stuck in your teeth for hours.
Yes, possibly. I would say I think they get stuck less because they actually get even more gelatinous than the seeds
Weird.
do.
Okay.
But for example, I have found, I don't think we've talked about this yet, Sarah, but I put a tablespoon of each in a bowl, soak them with water, because really to get the most out of seeds, you should let them hydrate. Soak them with water, and then I put a scoop of protein powder in there, and it makes like a chocolate pudding.
Oh, wow.
And then
Okay.
I've got protein. I've got 15 grams of fiber and almost 30 grams of protein in that. And then you can add some berries. You're really set up for your day. So that's been my go-to
Did you
breakfast.
hold that from me? There's going to
I
be a
know.
run on basil
I told you
seeds.
about my new breakfast.
Wow. Okay. It's happening.
Can you give us some tips, Meredith, for people? Because I think I struggle with the protein part. I just get bored with it. I think fiber's more fun. Can you give us some tips on if you don't love cooking meat all the time or you just don't have a lot of time? What are your protein tips?
Okay, this is where I am super practical. I'm a working mom. I get it. And listen, it would be great if we could all have grass-fed, grass-finished, organic meat, eggs, and fish just hanging out, ready to be eaten, but we don't, okay? After I leave the gym, I'm not going to pull a chicken breast out of my pocket to get my mandatory dose of protein after my strength training session. So this is where I think that protein shakes, and people can hate on me if they want because I know they're processed and they have chemicals in them, but let's talk about what's the lesser of two evils here. If you need to use processed things like pre-made protein shakes in order to meet your goal, I'm okay with that. It shouldn't be the main source of your protein. I do favor meat, fish, and eggs, but let's be realistic too. And so meal prep, I know that almost is a noxious word to some people because it's like, I don't have time to get everything I need to get done with my family, myself, my job. And now you want to meet a meal prep on top of it? Forget about it. And we throw in the towel before we've even started. So Costco and even your regular grocery store has made this really easy on us, I think. There are pre-made meat dishes. Like at Costco, they have these things called Kevin's meals. And they are, in general, are low sugar and just protein. And so these things you can heat up in a pan and there you go, you've got dinner ready. So there are pre-made things that you can just heat and eat at home that for your whole family that have made this easier. Most of us are not going to be fresh cooking protein sources multiple times a day. So buying these pre-made things is necessary. What else? High protein yogurt. This is a really good option for a lot of people. Those are my top tips. And then also, you're probably going to get bored with your protein. So I tell people, just accept it. The most successful and healthy people I know are pretty boring when it comes to their nutrition. They have their regular items on repeat, and it doesn't mean that you can't indulge every once in a while. You can't go to a new restaurant every once in a while. Of course you can. We are here to live life at the end of the day. What is all this for if we're not enjoying ourselves? But 90% of the time, the healthiest people I know are pretty boring and they have their lunches and dinners and breakfasts on repeat.
Yeah, you don't need 800 meals. And that's where you can, I think, especially just use plants to give you more of a variety and change. If you get raspberries one week, blackberries on sale the next time, just trying to get something different to what you're going to add to your yogurt, what you're going to add to dinner at night. Just get different vegetables each week, and that will keep it more interesting.
And I'll put a plug for one of my other favorite add-on protein sources is I find people have a lot of success of adding some roasted edamame that can be pretty high in protein. And so if they're dealing with some snack food cravings, having that or roasted chickpeas is a way that they are getting both protein and fiber. So those are always a fun little add-on that many people don't realize.
Yeah, chickpeas, love. They're just so easy to add to pretty much anything you're making. And then you're getting fiber and protein, which is a good double whammy. Also, I always just use the crock pot. If I'm going to make chicken, I'm never going to just make chicken for one meal. I'm always going to make enough to make a couple different meals from it because I don't want to have to remake it every day.
Yeah, that's a favorite strategy. I like getting at least 2 meals out of cooking.
Absolutely.
Many times.
And if you even double that, then you can freeze it. And a pork butt, chicken breasts, a chuck roast, all of these things. Now you've hit 3 different animals. They could all go in the crock pot and provide multiple meals and even be frozen for future use.
Tell us what your thoughts are on food timing.
Okay. This, again, is where men and women diverge a little bit. I like for women to get protein at more specific intervals during their waking hours. Men can tolerate a little bit longer, in my experience, in a fasted state. Fasting is just going for a period of time without any calories. So this is something that we all do overnight when we're sleeping, but we can extend those hours and maybe just have water, black coffee, black tea in the morning and extend that fast. And we can cut ourselves off after dinner and extend the fast that way. And so who should do this and who benefits from it? I think that men have more wiggle room here, whereas women, maybe it's not so good of an idea to be spreading out our fasts longer than those overnight hours. In my experience, women's bodies tend to get more stressed and hold on to more visceral fat if they're not getting protein at regular intervals throughout the day. So for my female patients in general, now there's always nuances, but in general, I want them to get 30 grams of protein within 2 hours of waking up. I want them to get a dose of protein after a strength training session. And for me, that's 30 to 40 grams. And I want them to get another dose of protein, combined with their other foods. This is not just high protein. This is protein with carbohydrates and fats at lunch and then at dinner. And then a general rule of thumb for everybody is don't eat if the sun isn't up. If you follow that rule, you are going to be helping your metabolic health. So for men, maybe they can skip breakfast and still be okay. But for women, in midlife, we're talking about here, I want them to eat breakfast and I want that breakfast to be protein forward.
So I've understood the data behind first meal of the day being 30 grams of protein to help with that protein muscle synthesis. But I feel like the data I have seen that eating, like having to have protein right after you work out or something like that, really seems to be all over the map. And I never really feel like I've found anything that makes me think like you really need to have it right after you work out. What do you think about that?
We live in a chat GPT and internet age, and I feel like we can find evidence on the internet to support anything that we want to say. So this is where I'm going to turn it back to patient experience and what I have seen in my practice with real patients, both men and women. The physiology of stress is something that I think needs to be taken into account here. Our bodies get more easily stressed, which shows up as storing fat, specifically visceral fat, if we're not getting enough nutrition. And in men, if they're overtraining and underfueling, they will actually put on belly fat. And so what I've seen in clinical practice is getting a dose of protein. For women, that's at least 30. For men, that's 40 and up within an hour or so of their strength training session tends to mitigate this. And we can take off the visceral fat. We can shrink the midsection if people are getting appropriate fuel for their exercise without stressing their bodies out. So,
Yeah,
okay,
so if you're looking at an in body or something for a patient, you feel like the patients that are being more diligent about protein first thing in the morning, protein after exercise, that you're seeing better changes in their visceral fat and body composition than patients that are not.
They're doing better. Absolutely. Yeah. So when we are talking about our weight, and this is important for the listeners, your weight tells a very limited picture. You want to get a body composition analysis that tells you how much muscle you have, how much fat you have, and where that fat is located. Is it in the visceral component or is it subcutaneous? So something like a fancy in-body scale, which I have in my office, can do this, but there's also plenty of options that you can purchase off Amazon for about $30 at home. Just search for a body composition scale, look at the ratings and choose one that, is 4 stars and up. You can track this yourself at home, but we want to make sure that any intervention that you do in your life with your nutrition, your exercise, your supplements is maintaining muscle mass, if not putting it. Okay, so fueling around workouts and fueling throughout the day, women tend to be more prone to overtraining and underfueling and having that show up as increased visceral fat, increased waist circumference than men. I think the women's bodies are just much more sensitive to physiologic stress than men. And I have come across so many women in my practice that are just killing themselves at the gym, but they are underfueling and their bellies are just growing and growing. And so they look at me like deer in the headlights when I tell them that they have to stop doing this just beating themselves at the gym for an hour every single day. Things like CrossFit and boot camps, I love them for the social component, but sometimes for patients, they may not be the best thing because you are just absolutely pounding yourself for 45 minutes to an hour. And if you're doing this in a fasted state and then you're not fueling afterwards, your body's not going to like you. You're going to actually put on weight around the midsection.
I'm glad you just brought that up. I want to pause right there because people work out at all different times of day. If there is someone that likes to work out, we'll talk about women specifically on this one, that likes to work out first thing in the morning, is that something that you do recommend doing in a fasted state? If there's someone that likes to get up at 5 a.m. and head and do their workout and then have their first meal of the day afterwards, as long as it's protein forward, or is that someone that you also would tend to recommend that they eat that 30 grams of protein before the workout?
This is a tough question because a lot of people, women especially, have emotional relationships with how they fuel and their exercise and the time of their exercise. So telling them to do something different sometimes it's like you're asking them to break up with their boyfriend. And so this is where I turn to the science. And women's bodies in midlife tend to do better and respond better to training in terms of optimizing body composition if they have fuel on board. So just 10 grams of protein, 10 grams of carbs. That will get enough fuel on board to tell your body that it doesn't need to release a stress response and it can go forward in that training, even if it's at 5 a.m. And then you can have your 30 grams of protein afterwards, whatever that looks like for you. So what I do personally, I eat a few bites of very high protein Greek yogurt with a few berries before I train. And that gets the fuel on board. That tells your brain that it doesn't need to go into stress mode, that it is not trying to go into survival mode, in which case it will store visceral fat.
I think the caveat to that for everyone is the most important thing is to do these things. And if getting tripped up in the order trips you up from doing them, just quit listening to us talking about it. But most important thing is make sure you're doing it. But if you are doing it and you really are up for tweaking it to get the best results, this is really what we're talking about here.
Because we get so granular with this stuff. And the main point is we want you to move your body. We want you to work your muscles harder than they want to. This is called progressive overload training, continuing to get stronger. And the rest of it, it's just nuance and it's getting very granular. But if you are focusing on protein, focusing on fiber, and getting in some strength training this week, and you didn't do that in the past, then you're already doing better.
And you've said a couple times now, it seems like you see a lot of women under fueling and just burning the cardio at the gym. What do you tend to see men doing that might be harming their metabolic health?
The biggest lever that men can pull is limiting alcohol. Alcohol is really tough on the body, especially in midlife. We don't handle it as well anymore. And people will notice this in the fact that when they wake up after just having a couple of beers, whereas they used to have 12, they're still feeling like complete crap. So this is your body telling you, not handling this anymore very well. And guess what's happening at the cellular level? Your mitochondria are being impacted, you're getting inflamed, and you're going to store visceral fat. The single biggest lever that men can pull and see really quick results is limiting alcohol. It's true for women too, but I just tend to see it more in men in my practice.
Yeah, I would agree with that because I feel like most women have already reduced alcohol when they come to you and they're trying to figure out how other things that they can do to improve their overall health and metabolic health. But sometimes many men, they were able to keep the alcohol on board when they were younger and do all the things and meet their goals, that it sometimes takes a little bit more of a push to decrease that.
I'm glad that you're seeing the exact same thing. That kind of
I second that.
Solidifies what I'm seeing in my practice. The women they've already started to limit it before they come to see me.
I also feel like it's a little bit easier to get women to exercise than men. If you've got a man that's always gone to the gym and he wants to keep going, that's easy. But the majority of men haven't kept that up forever and then might feel uncomfortable going back in around all these other men that have been lifting. What's your advice for men that haven't been going to the gym but are wanting to start doing some resistance training and things?
Actually see the opposite in my practice. It's harder to get a woman to start doing strength training than a man. But regardless of the sex of the individual, I tell them, then just start at home. If you're intimidated by the gym and being around other people, then buy 3 sets of dumbbells, a light, a medium, a heavy. And those definitions are up to you. It's what your body tells you is light, medium, and heavy. And just go in a room in your house and start doing some compound movements, some lunges, some squats, some overhead presses, some push and pull motions. And, for your lower body, you're going to use that heavy weight. For your accessory muscles like your triceps, you're going to use that lighter weight. And you're going to use the medium one for the majority of these things. Go into ChatGPT. Type in, I want a resistance training for myself. I have these 3 dumbbells. Lay it out for me. I want to devote 20 minutes to this 3 times a week, and it'll do it. Use AI as your personal trainer if you're intimidated. Even push-ups, wall squats, air squats, these things, if your body isn't used to them, guess what? That counts as resistance training. Anything that you're doing that's harder today than it was yesterday, it counts.
And as you're talking about this, is there specific recommendations? I know I get asked this question a lot, so I'd love to hear your take and your advice of, well, how many days a week should I be working out? Should I dedicate just one day to upper body, one day to lower body? Is it better to split it? Is it better to do full body? If you have someone that's willing to do the resistance training, how do you then provide advice on how to do it well?
Okay, so for the average person, we don't need to get as specific as what body part they should be working, what days, and how much recovery they should have between each body part. Now, that's bodybuilder status. That's like professional status. For the rest of us that are just looking to optimize our metabolic health and live long, healthy lives, I say, I want you strength training 3 times a week. I want you moving your body, doing some low-level cardio. This can be a brisk walk a couple times a week. And for a lot of people, I'm going to ask them to consider some high-intensity work. That is going to boost cardiorespiratory fitness. We measure this in terms of a VO2 max test, but one day of high-intensity work, so that can be things like sprinting on a treadmill for 20 minutes, off and on little bursts of hard efforts, and then endurance work, which is some people will refer to this as zone 2 training. Do that 1 time a week, and then 3 days a week of resistance training. That's a perfect prescription for the majority of people. In terms of resistance training, I don't prescribe a time that they need. You don't have to do it for an hour 3 times a week. I say use a few muscle groups to near exhaustion, and you checked that box. Near exhaustion, what that means, you might hear this called or failure. This just means that if you're doing something like a bicep curl and you're holding a weight and you're just doing this bicep curl over and over again, and you can do it 30 times and you're still not really winded and that muscle isn't really feeling like it's getting warm and hot and making you work harder, then it's time to go up in your weight. What I want you to get to is the point where after about 8 or 10 repetitions, you feel like you can't do much anymore and you have burned that muscle out. That is hypertrophy type training, and that is the best for metabolic and long-term health.
I will say when I first started resistance training, I like to giggle about this now because all I was thinking is, as long as I have a little weight and do my 3 rounds of 10, I'm making progress. And I quickly realized I didn't make a whole lot of progress, and I had to teach myself to push myself more to actually get the results that I want. So that was something that I also think a lot of women struggle with when they're all in on doing resistance training, but still don't understand what is required to increase that muscle mass.
Right. And so simply saying, you guys don't have a beep button, but I'm going to do it myself. Lift heavy, beep. That's the answer. Okay. If you are not feeling like this is really hard by the time you get to the 10th repetition, it's time to go up in your weight. And this definition changes for people over time. What's heavy for me is different than it is for Dr. Dotson. And what's heavy for me now is different than it's going to be 6 months from now. You are the only one that can be your own barometer for what is heavy. And so if you're getting to 10 repetitions and you're like, oh my gosh, that was hard, my heart rate's going up, I'm starting to have some beads of sweat, then you did it.
Yeah, once I actually started lifting heavy and I watched my heart rate go up, I was like, "Oh, this is it."
Yeah.
Yeah, once you
I
figure
made
it
it.
out and then you
Yes,
keep chasing
yes.
that and you get a rush of endorphins too with strength training. It's great. I feel like $1,000,000 when I finish workouts.
So let's say you've got someone that really has not been active for a long time and they feel a little intimidated hearing all this different stuff. How would you just break it down for them to get started?
This is pretty common. I see it a lot in my older population, but I also see it in the 40-year-olds. I've seen it across all age groups. And as soon as they start to get overwhelmed with what I'm telling them, I back off immediately and I say, we just need to be doing more than we were this time last year. So if you were walking, and I'm not a huge step counter, but I'm using an example here. If you were walking 5,000 steps before, we're going to go for 6,000, and that's going to be our goal for the next month. I like to give tiny incremental increases to what someone has done in the past to move the needle, to make progress. So if you were doing strength training one time a month in the past, we're going to shoot for one time a week now. Okay, let's not go from 0 to 100 in the next, couple of weeks. That's going to throw people off. It's not helpful information. But little tiny incremental increases in effort will get you to your goals in the long run.
And on the topic of building muscle, I think the other thing that's out there a lot around this are things like creatine and testosterone and all of those supplements that are out there. Do you have any thoughts about those types of things?
I have thoughts, yes.
I figured.
I've got thoughts. Okay. So we start with the fundamentals, and the fundamentals of muscle health are the protein. So feeding your body the building blocks in terms of animal sources of protein and whey protein supplements. These are the good ones to build muscle, and then doing the strength training. So let's say we've got those two things down and we want to add fuel to the fire and we want to boost our efforts even more. Creatine is the next lever I'm going to pull. And actually, I tell everyone to take creatine. But from a supplement standpoint, this is the one that's going to help us by giving our muscles a little bit more energy. It helps convert energy in our muscle tissue so that we can maybe get one more repetition in or lift slightly heavier weights. And that's going to get us to our goals of longevity. So creatine is great for giving our muscles more energy. It's also great for brain health. Creatine I recommend across the board for patients for muscle and brain health. The dose I like to say is anywhere between 5 grams up to 15 grams. The muscle benefits we tend to see at that 5-gram dose, and then over that, excess tends to spill over and give us cognitive benefits. I am not kidding you guys. I am a firm believer that 10 grams of creatine is going to help optimize cognitive abilities and brain health as well. I took 10 grams of creatine before this call today because I have been working for 96 hours straight and I saved my creatine. I actually didn't take it yesterday because I wanted to have that extra 10 grams today before I got on this call so I didn't sound like a blubbering fool after working 96 hours straight.
Can you explain to our listeners what the research is making a connection with creatine and brain health? Because I think forever we've all talked about it in regards to our muscles and helping build that. And that has just been something that has been around a while. But this brain connection is new.
Okay. What creatine does, let's answer that question by going back to the science. What creatine does is it helps our bodies make energy more efficiently. So we see the effects of it in our most energetic consuming parts of our body, and those are our muscles and our brain. They are the ones that are constantly using energy and churning through it in order to perform their functions. So it's not surprising that we see the benefits mostly in these highly metabolic organs of muscle and brain. Muscle tends to soak up that creatine first, and then spillover tends to happen and go to the brain to do its job. And maybe that's just people's interpretation of it. I don't think we've been able to measure that completely, but at 5 grams, I think muscle gets saturated, and at 10 grams, now we're seeing cognitive benefits. creatine as a molecule helps the body's process of forming energy. The currency of energy in the body is a molecule called ATP. And when we use it to perform an energetic process, we take off one of the phosphate groups and now it becomes ADP. So we went from 3 phosphate molecules to 2 phosphate molecules as we did that energetic process. Where creatine comes in is it is a phosphate sink. It's sitting there and it is giving new phosphate molecules quickly to that ADP so that it can regenerate, form ATP, and we can use it again. So we have more rapidly available sources of energy for our cells to do whatever they're meant to do. In our muscles, that is for them to contract and move an arm or a leg. In our brain, that is for neurons to fire and us to be more cognitively sharp.
I've been taking creatine for about a year. I usually take 5 milligrams, but sometimes I forget. But on days that I have really poor sleep, which luckily doesn't happen that often to me, I will take 10.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. I highly recommend that. If you're jet lagged, bring creatine with you. They make travel packets so you don't have to walk around with white baggies or plastic baggies of white powder. You can buy it in a travel packet so that TSA doesn't look at you weird. But take it with you when you travel. If you're going to be changing time zones, bring your creatine. It's going to help. Here's the difference. Any new parent can relate to this. When your baby just doesn't sleep and you're just up every couple of hours and you feel like a walking zombie. And then your baby gets a good night of sleep and the next day you're like, oh my God, I feel like a person again. That is creatine. That's the power of it.
I'm trying to learn this. So does our body process it better when we get sleep versus when we don't?
No, it processes it the same. It's just that our brain is struggling more when we have poor sleep, and so it needs extra help.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's needing
It's just
more.
needing more fuel, pretty much.
It's
Is what you're saying.
not that we're metabolizing it differently.
It's this problem.
I need a
It's just-
creatine this
We
weekend.
we
You
can
do. I need to bring you some.
Okay, so moving on to other additions besides the nutrition and the strength training, what else can we do to boost our ability to put on muscle? So you brought up sleep. We have to recover our bodies in order to put on muscle, and we have to make sure that we are not overly stressed. And this is another thing that people in midlife really tend to underestimate is how freaking stressed they are. Maybe they're caretakers for their own parents. They're still caretakers for their kids. They're excelling in their career. They are burning the candle at both ends and likely not making any intentional relaxation time for themselves. Your body is going to find it harder to put on muscle, to burn visceral fat if you are in this chronically stressed state. So this is where I encourage people to do something super easy. Take 5 minutes a day, remove distractions, and just do a breathwork practice. Just focus on your breathing. Set a timer on your phone and put that phone on Do Not Disturb. Go into a quiet room and do 5 minutes all by yourself. No distractions. Like, how often do we do that? We don't. We've got people wanting us to do stuff constantly. So we have to prioritize relaxation and stress relief. That's going to help you put on muscle. From a hormone standpoint, this is where testosterone can be helpful. And testosterone is almost a double-edged sword here. So testosterone can enhance our motivation and our energy and make our strength training more efficient. So you can increase your own testosterone by putting on muscle and by decreasing visceral fat. So testosterone supplementation is not always necessary. If you work and you decrease that visceral fat and you're actively working on strength training, you might be able to raise your own testosterone.
It's been interesting seeing patients increase their testosterone naturally. And I don't think many people realize that's even a thing.
No, because Big Pharma doesn't want us to know that. And men's clinics don't want us to know that we can naturally increase our testosterone just with lifestyle changes. Things like removing plastics from your life, looking at your personal care products, strength training intentionally, recovering, vitamin D supplementation, getting adequate sleep, all of these things. and losing weight, especially around the midsection, all of these things are going to naturally boost testosterone levels. I have seen multiple men increase their testosterone levels without any sort of exogenous injections or creams, just by optimizing their lifestyle. And that's not to say that some people aren't going to need those injections and creams. I'm not a naysayer, but there are other possibilities and things that you need to look at when you're talking about testosterone levels. And then for the women, as our estrogen is doing this crazy fluctuation during perimenopause and eventually going down to zero in menopause, we have to appreciate that estrogen was a anabolic stimulus. Anabolic just means building. It was a building stimulus for muscle. So as that goes away, we have to be more intentional with the things that we've already discussed. As estrogen goes away, it becomes harder to put on muscle. So we need to optimize our protein intake throughout the day and progressively work our muscles harder and harder.
Any other thoughts on how to reduce stress for people?
Oh boy, someone teach me. You know, I love asking people, prescribing basically time in nature, getting outside, getting natural sunlight at any point throughout the day. Morning time even better, but it is so calming to our nervous system. And it can even be going for a walk on your lunch break. If you work in a job where you only get 30 minutes for a lunch break, try to take it outside. Try to remove other stimuli. Put your phone down. Maybe that's the biggest one. Put your phone down. Our phones are constant sources of stress. Whether you're looking at social media or you're just constantly getting emails or text messages, put your phone on Do Not Disturb and put it down for 30 minutes. When you first do it, it's going to feel really hard and you're going to have this reflexive movement where you go to grab it over and over again. But take that time to reflect on, what is that phone really giving to you? How is it bolstering your health? It's probably not. It's probably, I
I
mean,
know Sarah's going to love that answer for you because, yeah, putting your phone down, I think, is really important.
you know what? I texted my husband this morning. So I just got off of this 96-hour on-call surgery shift. So I still practice general surgery 1 weekend a month for the listeners. And it's just a 96-hour marathon where I'm on call for 2 different hospitals as their general surgeon. And my call was finished at 7 a.m. this morning. And the first thing I did, because now I'm allowed to do it, they reached me through my phone, so I wasn't allowed to do this before. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and it's so freeing. It's like 1,000,000 pounds are lifted off of my shoulders. And put the apps, take off the Facebook app, take off the Instagram app, put them, put timers on them so you only get maybe 15 minutes a day on these various applications. Our phones are stress. Our calendars are stress. You almost have to schedule your own relaxation time. Like put yourself on the calendar and say, you can't bother mommy for these 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I feel like so many people, including me, struggle with not having what we would see as productivity time, but not really understanding that the rest and relaxation is what our body needs. And it's still a need, even though we're not doing something.
Right. It's almost, if you feel like you need to check boxes constantly throughout the day, then put yourself in a box and make relaxation and prioritizing intentional you time, make that one of the boxes. This is where, since we are talking about midlife, it's really important to say that people in midlife are the worst at this. We are achieving and supporting everyone else around us. And this, I have no doubt, is part of the downfall of our metabolic health in midlife, because this constant need to achieve more and be productive, as you said, the constant productivity. We feel like we can't take 5 minutes to ourselves without getting a task done. Otherwise, we're not winning at the day. This is really detrimental to our health. And I'm terrible at it. I'll be the first to admit I am terrible at this. I'm preaching to myself here.
Yeah, it's something I'm working on too. I always used to, if I wanted to watch a show or something, I've always used folding laundry as my excuse. I've been trying to be like, you know what? If you want to watch something, it's okay to just watch it and not fold laundry. It's okay. But that's a hard kind of thing to get through your head.
Yeah, I think what helped me learning to not be productive before bed and seeing how much better I could sleep and fall asleep by having some wind down time, as I love to talk about on this show. That was something that really helped me accept that and that it was good for lots of reasons.
That was the best segue ever because we need to talk about sleep in midlife and how sleep can set us up for metabolic success throughout the day. A lot of times, people that are high overachievers, chronically trying to be productive, they won't sleep well. And maybe they don't realize it. We have devices that can track our sleep now. We have Aura rings and Whoop bands. You don't need something expensive, though. I'm not suggesting that you go out and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but what I am saying is we need to prioritize sleep at this point in our lives more than ever. If we're not getting that recovery and giving our nervous system that time to relax, then everything gets harder. Our cells suffer, our metabolism suffers, we get more inflamed. So here's some easy things that people can do to optimize their sleep. And none of this is probably going to be groundbreaking news, but I'm going to say it anyway so you can hear it again. You want to limit your screen time. Get rid of screens an hour before bed if you can. If you are the kind of person that watches TV to put yourself to sleep, at least put on those blue light blocking glasses. You want to dim the lights. As soon as the sun goes down, you want to start creating that same environment in your house. If the sun is going down outside, I want you to be turning off bright lights in your house to signal to your body that it is time to wind down. A lot of people find benefit in journaling before bedtime, getting thoughts out of their head, getting all of these productivity things and work-related tasks or emotional kind of stressors that they have, get them out of your head and out onto a journal or a piece of paper before bed so that they don't wake you up in the middle of the night. There is a lot of power in getting these things out so that they can't wake you up at 3 a.m. And lastly, my favorite one is do not eat within 3 hours of bedtime. If you go to bed with an empty stomach, your nervous system is already calming down. You're already in that resting environment in your body, and your blood sugar is going to be more stable, which leads to better sleep. So turn down the lights, remove screens, go to bed with an empty stomach.
Yeah, I would say that last one is extremely powerful.
Mm.
And also one that I didn't know there was such a strong connection before lifestyle medicine. And I feel like more people should be told about that connection because a lot of people are motivated by getting better sleep. So there's many reasons not to snack right before bed. But when you see how much better your sleep is, it makes you want to keep doing it.
Right. And alcohol here is really negative for sleep. A lot of people are like, but it helps me fall asleep easier because they get drowsy. Yes, but all night, or at least for the first 6 hours of your night, your body is overly stressed. It's processing that toxin. It can't relax and get the deep sleep that it wants. You're not going to feel great the next day. Again, we're not in our 20s anymore.
To wrap us up, would you mind just taking us through a patient, maybe a male patient, because we do talk about females so much on this, a male patient that you have worked with that has been able to make a few changes, maybe not extreme, but has been able to make a few changes that have led to big changes in their health?
Okay. I love this one. And obviously, we can't mention names, but as soon as he hears me talking, if he listens to this, he's going to know it's him. So I had an athlete come and see me, and it was because he was not progressing at his sport and able to perform at the level that he wanted to anymore. And it turns out what we figured out in our analysis is that he needed more recovery time. He needed to chill out, for lack of a better term. He needed intentional relaxation time in his life. He needed to eat more. He was not fueling his body appropriately. He was overtraining, and he added creatine. What happened in our subsequent evaluation was that, one, subjectively, he's like, I feel like myself again. I feel like I can excel at life, at parenting, at being a dad, and at my sport. He was putting on muscle. He was a pretty lean guy. He was putting on muscle. His sport of choice is an endurance sport, so it wasn't necessarily strength training focused. So once he made that switch and started adding in a few more sessions of strength training, he felt better. He had more energy, better mood, better outlook, excelling in his sport, and he raised his own testosterone level. He was such an avid athlete that he did not elect to do testosterone replacement. He's like, I have to do this on my own. And he did it by prioritizing recovery, sleep, nutrition. He had some work to do on his vitamin D and his omega-3 levels and adding creatine and fueling his body better, eating more.
That's awesome.
Love that.
Yeah, he was also like, I was intimidated when he first came to see me because on paper, this guy looks like he's got it all figured out. His body composition was great, but subjectively, he's like, I do not feel right. This isn't right. Something's wrong. I need help. So I was intimidated by this guy, but it was these little tricks like adding creatine, prioritizing recovery, adding strength training, and adding a little bit more protein that were the game changers for him.
Yeah. And that's where I think it's important to remember that all of this is personalized. What one person needs is not what someone else needs.
Can we take one more female example? Because I think that this is important. I talked about an athlete, but most people are not athletes. So let's relate this more to your listeners. So I do want to talk about the midlife working mom example.
Yes,
Because
let's do it.
I've been seeing a lot of this lately. The midlife working mom, she's taking care of everyone else. She's excelling at her career. And I have had a lot of women come and see me that their body composition is getting worse and worse. They are not feeling like themselves. And they want to, one, they want to feel like themselves again, but two, they want to feel great in their own skin. And almost across the board, these women are overtraining. They are pushing themselves so hard in the gym or during their classes, and they are underfueling because chronically for decades, they've been told to eat less and move more, and your body will respond how you want it to. And that just doesn't work anymore in midlife. Your body will rebel against you and it will put on visceral fat and you will not get the gains that you want. So this is my plug to midlife women. You have to fuel appropriately and you don't want to be absolutely crushing yourself for hours in the gym. It's going to work against you. A few sessions of focused strength training a week, getting some intentional endurance training, just a 45-minute brisk walk a couple times a week. That's probably what your body is asking for right now.
Well, I think that's good for all of us to hear.
I mean, I have so many personal stories, but I don't like to share those too much. But that this has been the story of my life. I did not change my body until I started eating more and lifting weights.
Yeah, lifting weights made such a big difference for me and eating differently for sure. Yeah.
I had to add carbs in. I had to stop fasting. And I had to give, and it was a weird change for me at first, eating protein multiple times throughout the day and not going for 16 or 18 hours in a fasted state. That was no longer working. And so starting to eat more and more frequently, my body has just completely changed.
Yeah, as a surgeon, you got really good at fasting.
Yeah.
You didn't have a choice.
And you know, just constantly just beating ourselves down with these long work hours and not eating and not exercising and using that as a badge of honor. Those badges of honor will kill you quickly.
Yes. So we are so grateful for you doing another show with us. I think we had a lot of good points today. I have to say, probably the biggest one, and hopefully all of our listeners walked away with this, that muscle is our metabolic engine. So if you're doing nothing to help with your muscle mass, you are missing out on a lot of opportunity to improve your overall health, your metabolic health, and just longevity in general. And so take a moment to pause and think today about how can I work on building muscle. And I think Dr. Sweeney gave us tons of tips on how to do that and how to do it in even small steps so it's not overwhelming.
And so if you need help with your personalization, how could someone come see you, Dr. Sweeney?
You can go visit my website, sonolongevity.com. On social, I'm very active, and I have two different handles. I have at Dr. Meredith Sweeney on Instagram and at Sano_longevity. That's SANO_longevity. There's a lot of just content out there to help you with little tips and tricks for optimizing for longevity. On my website, you can reach out and book a free consultation, find out more about what I do in my practice. And yeah, just thank you for sharing your platform with me.
And be sure that you check her out if you need more specifics. And we look forward to talking to you all next week.
Bye.